the same word, different meanings on the same situation to understand the other's perspective. Good, whatever time of day it is that you're tuning in. I do appreciate you being here. This is Consequences of Communication podcast episode 0, kind of behind the scenes kind of thing. So this is who am I and why consequences of communication. So the question that I want to pose throughout this entire episode and leading into the next episodes, because it's going to be the foundation for the foreseeable future with this podcast. What is the key to every successful relationship? So who am I? My name is Tyler. I'm a early 30s white guy, for those of y'all who can't see me. I spent 7 years in the military as an United States Air Force air traffic controller. I then got out of the military, spent the last 2 years in the tech field, and I decided to start a podcast. During my time in the military, there was a lot of communication going on involved, especially with air traffic. Very short, sweet, to the point, really specific words for doing something. A 2 or 3 letter word can drastically change how a rule was read. And depending on your interpretation of the rule, or if it was mistyped in the book and misread, then lives could have been on the stake, or lives would be at stake if that was the case, especially with air traffic control. During that time in the military, I was married twice and divorced twice before the age of 25. And I'm the kind of person that I like to think of myself as pick myself up by the bootstraps, but I can't do it by myself. I have to have friends and accountability partners and things like that, which are very important. I suggest you get them. We'll get into that portion too later on down this journey together. I brought those up because I want to be honest with y'all about where my experience comes from and why communicating is just so very important. And I am the kind of person that takes a look at a situation, whether it went bad or it went good, and take a look back and like, okay, so this was a good situation. Point A, B, and C was good. D was when we kind of messed up a little bit. We got back on track with E. So next time we go through a similar process, we're going to go A, B, C, pay a little bit more attention to D to make sure that we're doing on the right, and then go to E and F, and so on and so forth. That's a little bit about who I am. I take my lessons learned from past experiences, especially from other people. An example, growing up. If my sister, who's a couple years older than I am, got grounded for a weekend because she didn't vacuum her room, I'm like, I got that. I am going to vacuum my room, so I won't get grounded. I am going to vacuum my room, so I won't get grounded. And it worked out pretty well. So I've just been keeping up with that. I do believe we can learn a lot of lessons from other people's successes, failures, and how they bounce back from those failures. Not only that, but there's so much other information that we can get by learning from other people that has nothing to do with technology. I mean, technology definitely helps with like TikTok, YouTube, podcasts, short videos like TikTok and Instagram, and then also long format videos. You can learn a lot of information through that, and the access to that information is really fantastic. It's really good. What I'm trying to do here, and why I do believe that you should listen, is unless you're a mid or early 30s white guy from Denver that has been divorced twice by the age of 25 while being in the military that went into tech. This is Tyler from editing. I'm also Christian. Don't know why I didn't put that in there initially, but I am Christian. Now back to our regular scheduled podcast. I really don't believe that I'm going to have the same exact perspective as somebody else. But even if you do check those boxes, there's so many nuances in our past that are unique to you as an individual and unique to me as an individual that help form us to who we are today. Now, with that said, I really do think it would be important for you to listen just to get another perspective. And you can let me know if this works by leaving me a comment or a review on this podcast or on each episode, and I will read them and get back to you. So the next question that I need to answer, and I'll tell you with a story. So I was telling one of my life philosophies. I have a handful of life philosophies that I live by that we'll get into in the next few weeks, so don't worry. I'm just not going to say them yet. I was talking to one of my friends about one specific life philosophy, and that was kind of the spark of this podcast. We were talking, and I was like, man, it would just be really nice to, you appreciate what I've had to say. I've changed your perspective on how you look at the process of communication and how communication should be. That, man, I really should start a podcast or think about starting a podcast. And he's like, yeah, you should totally do that. And I'm like, sweet. Now we need to figure out what we're going to call it. And then, sometime later, a couple days later, maybe, I was talking with him again, and I was explaining like, man, this is really something that I'm really interested about and really wanting to do. I really want people to understand what the consequences of communication are. And then he immediately like perked up and like pointed his finger at me, and I was like, that actually sounds like a good title. And then he's like, I was just going to say that. And I ended up typing it in my phone so I wouldn't forget, because that's me. If I don't type it in a note and I'm like, hey, I want to keep this for later, I probably won't remember. So I need to actually have that written down, which is good for me because that's one way I communicate with myself as a reminder to my future self. So that's how consequences of communication really came to be. That statement, but it's also really interesting because I like taking a word that has a societal negative connotation to it, like consequences, because at least what I've observed is the word consequences the word consequences or consequence isn't used except in a punishment attitude or a negative connotation. Like, you do this, you have to deal with the consequences. You're going to do this, you have to deal with the consequences. Well, here's the consequences of what you just talked about. This is the consequences of you doing this. This is the consequences of you doing that. Because you stayed out past your bedtime or stayed out past your curfew, you're now grounded. Like, that's your consequence. Like, that's really what it was for me. Growing up, that's what it really came to be. My dad tried his best to make sure that the word consequence for me was good or bad. Like, it just meant the result of, which is what consequences means. The result of. So consequences of communication is the result of communication. And that's really what it is. Just like another word that I don't like that has a negative connotation to it is the word audacity. Typically used in kind of like a statement of like, oh, this person had the audacity to come talk to me. And, like, or something like that. That was just a basic example. It's used in that negative connotation form where it is just absolutely atrocious. I don't even know if atrocious has another meaning to it, but I think you understand what I'm meaning. So audacity actually means, let's see, do I still have it pulled up? Yeah. So audacity means a willingness to take bold risks. And typically when somebody's like, they had the audacity to come and approach me, it usually refers to a member of the opposite sex coming up and approaching them when it's like, I wasn't giving them any kind of signals at all. But really, audacity should be like, because even the same situation, a guy approaches a girl at a bar, club, golf, I don't know, wherever you guys meet women. Or, wherever y'all hang out to pursue a romantic relationship, where it's typical that the guy tries to approach the woman and the woman is like, oh, the audacity of him approaching me. And then the guy's friends are like, man, he is so audacious right now. He is taking brave action. Like, that's really kind of the same word, different meanings on the same situation to understand the other's perspective. So that's a drastic example, but it's kind of like the only real example, at least the only one that comes to my head right now. All right, so I think I've beaten that to a dead horse. So the only other thing that I really wanted to touch base on during this specific episode was the term relationship, especially when referring to what is the key to every successful relationship. The relationship is, or a relationship is romantic, typically in nature. It's a societal connotation to it. But a relationship is really what person A means to person B and vice versa. Like how for lack of a better term, how they are related. How do they relate to each other? How are they connected to each other? Like parent-child, child-parent, friend, distant relative, family, romantic partner or romantic relationship. All of those are going to be talked about in this podcast. And it's going to be very specific on what we're going to be talking about and when we're going to be talking about it. If I miss saying something like the parent-child relationship or the child-parent or the parent-child relationship or the romantic relationship, whatever that word is before that or after, or instead of relationship, I put friendship. I may do that. But I'm pretty sure y'all are confident, and I believe that you are more intelligent to put the context clues up for what specific relationship I'm talking about. So just ask for a little bit of grace for that. So before I let you go, over the next several episodes, probably about 6 to 8, we're going to answer why communication is a key to every successful relationship. Is such a generic statement where it doesn't get specific enough. I just like with audacity or audacious or consequences, those have a societal negative connotation to it, but are very precise in what they mean. Communication is the key to every successful relationship. That was a thing that came out in like late 90s, early 2000s, somewhere in there. And it got really popular by like 2007, 8, 9, somewhere in there. I initially liked that, but it wasn't specific or exact enough for my personal taste in what it is. So I do hope that y'all would bear with me as we go through this. So that's kind of where it's specificity and being clear with what you need to talk about and using words. Otherwise, you won't understand what I'm trying to say, and I won't understand what you're trying to say. And that's really what I want to try to do, is to help mitigate that potential risk, I guess. I don't know if we want to call it risk. Probably not. That sounds horrible. But it is a risk. Just like being audacious. Taking a bold risk. With that, I do appreciate you tuning in. So I will be releasing the podcast on the first and third Tuesdays of the month by 5 p.m. Central Standard Time. So keep a lookout for that. This episode specifically should be released with episode 1, just because this was like a behind the scenes kind of thing. And episode 1 will be really starting to get into it. It's called Ground Rules. And that's really more specific what the format is going to be in rules on how we're going to communicate. So thank you again for tuning in, and I'll catch you next time. If you enjoyed this, please like, subscribe, share, leave a comment, leave a review. I would greatly appreciate that, and I'll respond to it. Thank you so much. Take care.